segue into my next kind of overarching theme. I want to talk about scale. And I'm using that as the umbrella by which I want to host this part of the conversation. And this semi picks up from our last conversation where we discussed leverage, like a Naval-ism. But effectively, I've been playing around with this idea that food doesn't scale. And to define our terms a little bit better, I'm talking about the type of scale where there's a marginal decrease or effectively net zero cost to replicate a entree or a scoop of ice cream or a canapé. That doesn't exist yet, right? Like we don't have a machine where, again, there's no marginal cost to create more. Like you still have to buy the flour or the sugar or the milk or the pork belly or the avocados. And yes, I think we get caught up with this idea that wholesale pricing or getting a case discount or whatever is scale. But no one has a business, a food business, where they're effectively saying, once I hit 100 customers in seats, it's pure profit from there. In the same way that, like, if I'm going to put a podcast out for 1 people, it effectively works for 1,000. The food cost is the same every single time someone orders their burrito bowl, for example. And so in my mind, what scales might be the systems, most often exemplified in food businesses like franchises, for example. Would you agree that food doesn't scale? And I have a follow-up question, but I hate when interviewers ask 2 questions in one. So would you agree that food doesn't scale?
Yeah. I mean, there's some economy of scale with like size of parties. Like I talk about, like I do dinners for 2 to 20. And if I go out and do a dinner for 2 and I charge $100 a head, that's $200. I would rather do a dinner for 10 and make 1,000, and it's not that much more expensive. Like I get a better profit because it's the time, right? Because the time is essentially the same. Like it doesn't take much more time to cook for 10 than it does for 2. And especially if it's one day, like I go out and do one dinner. But yeah, obviously, if you're buying ribeye steak, if I have 2 people, it costs X. And if I have 10 people, well, I still have to buy 8 more portions of ribeye. I might save on the fact that like the time where I could do more events, like I could do more days of events. I'd rather do 1 day of 10-person parties than, 5 days of 2-person parties. So yes, I agree. Whereas with the podcast, I put the podcast out and whether 1 person or 1,000 people listens to it, it's the same. It costs me the same time, the same processing, editing fees and everything. So yes.
So you semi-touched on it, but how do you think about, and you can approach this from how you divvy up your time versus what you like to prioritize versus what you see as kind of like the end goal for, like, in my ideal work day or my ideal work week, Chris, would like to be working on these sorts of projects. How do you think about doing work that scales versus work that doesn't scale? Because there's value in both, in my opinion, but I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, that's been a big one for me, especially during the past year. I've really started thinking about, like, do I even really want to be cooking professionally that much anymore? Like how valuable to me and to the world is my content creation? I find that I've really gone deep into the podcasting thing and the Chefs Without Restaurants community and almost put the personal chef thing on the back burner almost to a fault. I mean, there's been times where like I've just like blipped out, like someone sent me a request for dinner and I didn't get back to them in a timely manner. And like I lost the gig just because my head was somewhere else. Like, I was unemployed for 11 weeks. So I really was like, well, what am I going to do? And while there was no personal chef business, I really went deep into the podcasting. And I just found that I loved it so much. And I really buried myself in the work of like, how do I make a better quality show? How do I interview better? How do I, make the audio quality sound better? And now I'm just thinking like, I would almost rather, like, could I work 1 day a week and make like $1,000 on a Saturday night and have 6 days where I'm just doing something else? Because I know that I can't scale the personal chef business the way that I would want to. I mean, I could hire chefs and send them out, but that's never what I've wanted to do. Like, that's why I got out of the restaurant business. I don't want to be a manager anymore. I don't want to send 5 chefs out on the same Saturday night and be managing menus. That's not fun for me. I cook because I love it. But now I found that I also like being I don't want to call myself a storyteller. It's more the facilitator of storytelling, right? Like I'm getting these great guests on my show and helping them tell their story and sharing it with the world. And if I could financially support myself doing that, I kind of feel like that's what I would want to do. And then maybe just go do one event a week just to keep my hands in the cooking. Or, if part of Chefs Without Restaurants is me getting paid via a Patreon or some kind of thing where I could just create recipes at home, like maybe I don't even have to go out and cook for customers anymore. If I could be in my kitchen at home, create dishes, photograph them, share the recipes and get paid for that, like I think that's something I'd be comfortable with.
Well, the first time you do it, and when I say it, meaning do something that truly scales. Like you do something, and whether 5 people sign up or 100 people sign up, it's the same output from you. It feels like a glitch in the matrix, man. Like the first time you make money online versus what Naval calls trading your time for money. It's honestly like, how can you ever unsee that? Like, how can you ever uh, you're constantly comparing what you do at this trading time for money thing versus this other thing, which is, the Jack Butcherism of like build once, sell twice is what he talks about.
Yeah,
And
one of the things I started doing was I started using Instacart for the first time ever. And it
yep,
and it just because like, I don't know, I think this chef thing in you is like, I need to pick out all my ingredients. I need to do this and that. And going back to Naval, thinking about, he talks about this like aspirational hourly wage. And it's like, when I think about the hours that I was spending going to the grocery store, because I was really trying to be lean and have a good profit margin as far as food costs. So it's like I would go to Aldi to buy X, Y, and Z, and then I would drive across town to go to Wegmans to buy X, Y, and Z, and then I would go to Common Market to buy all this. But I was spending like 5 or 6 hours grocery shopping. Like, what is that time worth? And then when COVID came, where like I was kind of worried about, going into stores and stuff, I just started doing it. I was like, I'm never going to go grocery shopping again. Like the margin of, I call it error, like letting a grocery store clerk pick out the ribeye steaks for a party, like I'm okay with that. Like that's within the realm. Like if I look at it in the car and it's garbage, I can always go exchange it. But like, what am I really saving? I'm saving like 15 hours a week. Like if I have all these parties, I'm saving a ridiculous amount of time by having someone do that. And just really start thinking about how I spend my time and how does the time kind of fit into the equation as well, and not just the fixed cost of like a product.
I mean, you mentioned this word of satisfaction as well. Like and I find that they're different types of satisfaction, and maybe this is something that I have yet to learn, and I will learn as I grow older and do this a little bit more. But I feel a different type of satisfaction doing food related work, from the sense of like when my company produces an event and I get to cook the dinner. That's a different satisfaction than putting out this podcast, and the accompanying clips and the Instagram content for it will be. And I think that I need, and I don't mean to turn this into a therapy session, but I'm hoping to get maybe some of your insight to people that might be feeling something the same, is that like, it doesn't, the satisfaction comes from, like, I need to be better at finding satisfaction in scalable work. You know what I mean? Because like you're saying, it gives you more time with your family. It allows you to reach more people. You're not completely like gobbling up resources to make your money. And if and you're doing good, like you're doing good things. It's not like I'm like scaling my install malware on old people's computer business. You know what I mean? Like I'm doing good stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Like how can I get better at that? Like finding the satisfaction in that.
And I think some of it is like, how much is it that people around you don't feel like what you're doing is a real job? Because I think it's still emerging. So, like I have a neighbor across the street who I love, and she works in the health field. And all week she's been doing conferences, and she's doing conferences with all these well-known people. And that's like acceptable, right? But when I say that, like, I have a Clubhouse chat today with all these people in the food world, I think people don't think it's a real thing, even though, I'm on a panel with, 3 chefs who've been on Top Chef and these people who are really well-known in the food world. people look at that and say like, oh, that's not like a real thing. You know, he's talking on a Clubhouse panel where like I'm sitting doing this like infectious disease conference or something. You know, my in-laws live with me and they're from a very different generation. I still don't think they understand what I do when I say my work today is like I'm locking myself in the office from, 5 to 8 o'clock because I have, a Clubhouse chat and then a podcast. Like, but that's brand building and, leveraging this thing. And I think you have to be comfortable just saying like, this is what I do. People might not understand it. And I still have challenges with that. Like neighbors, when it's like, oh, I got to go. I have a podcast. I don't think they understand that that's work because they don't understand how you can make money from that. They don't understand how that's a job and like being comfortable with like, yeah, your neighbors might think that you're like a bum or something, and that's really hard.